Hey guys, it's Miss B here. I'm going to be reading you guys chapter 1 of our book Jack that we are going to be doing our novel study on. As I'm reading this, you guys know that you can also read this on your own. In the materials section under Beatty, you'll see Jack chapter 1, and you can always just download that and read it yourself, or you can come back and listen to this video. Depending on how long a chapter is, you might have to have two different parts of a video, but that is okay. So with that being said, we've made our prediction for what we think Jack is going to be about. So let's start reading. Chapter 1, A Sprinkling of Dirt. When I was born, Papa named me after my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who, legend had it, conquered 9 giants and married the daughter of a duke. Mama said this was all hogwash. Firstly, there was no such thing as giants. Wouldn't we see such large creatures if they really existed? And secondly, we had no relation to any duke. If we did, we'd be rich and living on a grand estate. Instead, we were poor as dirt and lived in a tiny house on a small farm in a little village. Nothing great or giant about it. But Papa wasn't concerned with the details. He believed there was greatness in that name, and if he gave it to me, somehow the greatness would sink into my bones. "We'll name him Jack," Papa said. "He'll be great." "If you say so," said Mamma. She was a practical woman and not particular with names. All she needed was a word to call me to supper or to deliver a scolding. I got my first scolding before my first supper just after birth, for as soon as Papa pronounced my name, I sprang a sharp tooth and bit my mother. "Ouch!" Mamma cried. "You naughty boy!" It was something she would call me more often than Jack. Papa had the nerve to laugh. "Oh, Alice, he's just a baby. He doesn't know any better." But Mamma believed I did know better. To her, that bite was a little omen of what was to come, like a sprinkle before the downpour, a buzz before the sting, or the onset of an itch before you realize you're covered in poison ivy. Maybe I was born to be great, but great at what? At 5 months old, I learned to crawl. I was as fast as a cockroach, Papa said. One minute I was by Mama's skirts, and the next I was in the pigsty, rolling around in the muck and slops. Mama said she had to bathe me twice a day to keep me from turning into a real pig. I learned to walk before my first year, and by my second I took to climbing. I climbed chairs and tables and woodpile trees. Once Mama found me on the roof and snatched me up before I slid down the chimney into a blazing fire. "Such a naughty boy," said Mama. "He's just a boy," said Papa. But I didn't want to be just a boy. I wanted to be great. At night, Papa would tell stories of Grandpa Jack, how he'd chop off giants' heads and steal all their treasure and rescue the innocents. I knew if I was going to be great, I'd have to go on a noble quest and conquer a giant, or 9, or like my 7 great-grandpa Jack. There was only one problem. I'd never seen a giant in all my 12 years. "Stop staring at the sky, Jack," said Papa. "The work's down here." It was harvest time, same as every year. Work, work, work. Boring, boring, boring. And after the work was done, we all were still poor as dirt. Papa whistled a merry tune as he cut the wheat. I grumbled as I gathered it up in a bundle and tied it around the middle. We did this over and over until we made a pile as tall as Papa. We thought we'd be nearly done, but when I looked up, I saw acres of uncut wheat. "Snakes and toads," I grumbled. How I hated the sight. "Ain't she the prettiest sight you ever saw?" Papa called the land as she, like a lady, he was trying to woo. Most of the time, it seemed like the land just sat in Papa's face, but he was ever faithful. Papa loved that land. Me, I could live without it. I preferred a sword to a scythe and a noble steed to cow. I'd go on a quest to fight giants and get golds and riches. Then I'd never have to milk other cow or I'd never have to milk another cow or harvest a crop on a hot day. I looked toward the house where Mama was hanging the wash on the line. Annabella was fiddling around like a butterfly, her braids bouncing on her shoulders, not a care in the world. Eek! Annabella screamed and frantically shook her apron. A fat grasshopper flew out and disappeared into the tall grass. She stifled a laugh. Annabella is my sister, 4 years younger. I guess when I hit 3 or so, Mama decided I was a lost cause and tried again, taking every precaution to do things differently. So firstly, she had a girl, and secondly, she didn't allow Papa to name her or make any declarations of greatness. She was Mama's sweet girl. I remember seeing Annabella for the first time after she was born, all pink and bald and toothless. Mama cooed at her like she'd finally gotten what she always wanted, a boring lump that didn't bite or even move. Back to work, Jack, said Papa. I sighed. Papa cut and I gathered and tied. Work, work, work. Boring, boring, boring. I considered feigning illness so I could take a break. But what luck! Someone else disrupted the work for me. Mama was walking towards us now. Annabella bounced at her side, and on the other side was our nearest neighbor, but not certainly our dearest friend, Miss Letty Nettle. She looked none too pleased at this moment. Her eyebrows were pushed together, and the folds around her mouth hung down around her chin like one of those saddened hounds, only she was an angry hound. She glared right at me. Mama anxiously twisted her apron in her hands. I scratched my head and scoured my brain. Had I pulled any pranks on Miss Letty lately? I didn't think so. Papa looked up and stopped whistling. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief and glanced down at me, as if he knew what was coming. Good day, Miss Letty, said Papa. Don't you good day me. It's a terrible day, said Miss Letty. Oh, what's the trouble? My cabbages have been stolen. Stolen? Yes, stolen. A whole lot of them. Miss Letty Nettle's pride and joy was her field of cabbages. They always took first prize in the vegetables at the harvest festival. If there was an early frost, Miss Letty covered her cabbages with blankets, and I'd even heard her singing lullabies to her fields. Well, now, that is a strategy, said Papa. We always look forward to your big, beautiful cabbages. Tragedy? This is no tragedy. It was thievery. Miss Letty glared at me again. I blinked. She believes it was Jack who stole them, said Mamma. Annabelle smirked a little. She always enjoyed watching me get in trouble. I searched for a beetle to put on her head. Now hold on a moment, Miss Letty, said Papa. What makes you think Jack had anything to do with your missing cabbages? Miss Letty looked at Papa like he was brainless. Because he always has something to do with it. Remember when he brought me a sack of sugar? I thought he was right sweet and neighborly until it turned out to be salt. Ha! I forgot about the sugar salt switch. Snakes and toads, the look on her face when she bit into a salty plum pudding was incredible. I never knew a face could twist in so many directions. I nearly choked to death, said Miss Letty, and no one could ever forget the day he took my underthings and hung them out in public. Miss Letty turned as purple as a purple cabbage. Oops, right here. I remember, said Papa solemnly, but I could tell he was biting his cheeks, holding back a smile. I also remember that Jack confessed his crimes and paid pensions. He's a truthful boy, so why don't we ask him? Jack, son, do you know anything about Miss Letty's cabbages? I shook my head. No, sir. You little liar, said Miss Letty. This has your hand written all over it. I didn't set foot in your field. I don't even like cabbages. That much is true, said Papa. Jack here doesn't like anything remotely green. I remember trying to feed him some green beans as a baby. He spat them all over my face. Papa chuckled. Miss Letty did not. He's not a baby anymore, she said. He's a great big lying, stealing, convening rotten. If Jack says he didn't do it, then he didn't. This time it was Mamma who spoke, her face solemn as an oath. I breathed out a sigh of relief. Mamma didn't often defend me, but if she said I was innocent, then I was innocent. Her word was truth and law, and everyone knew it, even Miss even Miss Letty Nettle. Miss Letty Neville scrunched up her face. Well then, who stole my cabbages? It was a mystery. In all the small village where mysteries are in short supply, word travels fast. By noon, the whole village had gathered to inspect Miss Letty's cabbageless field. It was a mess, to say the least. There were great heaps of dirt in some areas and giant holes in others. Some of the trees had fallen over, torn up by the roots. The widow Francis's 13 children turned it into a playground, sliding down the mounds of dirt and jumping into the newly formed ditches, unaware of any misfortune. My, said Baker Baker. Yes, his name was Baker Baker. Firstly, because his name was Baker, and secondly, because he was an actual baker of breads and rolls and pies. He said his father named him after that so he'd be twice the baker. It also had the effect of making him say a lot of words twice. Who could have thought such a terrible thing? A couple of suspicious glances drifted my way. They were probably remembering how I set fire to the blacksmith's shop a few weeks ago. But that wasn't on purpose. I was trying to light a torch to go on a giant hunt. Jack didn't do it, said Papa. I can vouch for my son. I heard some thunder last night, said Horace. Kept Cindy tossing and turning. Cindy was Horace's pet pig. He carried her everywhere and talked to her like she was a real person. Maybe it was lightning struck on your field. Fried all the cabbages. Do you see any fried cabbages here? Asked Miss Letty. They're gone. Uprooted. Stolen. Wild animals, then? Awfuled Horace. Maybe it was your fat pigs, said Miss Letty. You're always letting those hogs get into my cabbages. Cindy wouldn't eat your cabbages, would you, girl? Snort. See, Cindy's a good girl. Miss Letty snorted too. I doubt a herd of cattle would have done this, let alone pigs, said Papa. I'm telling you, it was a storm, said Horace. Didn't you hear it? There were murmurs of agreement. The harvest season brought with it plenty of storms, rainstorms and windstorms and lightning storms, of any which could destroy whole villages. But what kind of storm could tear up one field? Someone asked. It wasn't no storm, another voice said. I know who stole your cabbages. A hush fell as the man limped into the circle, pulling a creaky cart behind him. It was Jabber, the one-legged tinker. His other leg was a scratched-up chunk of wood from the knee down, and it made a solid thunk with each step. Thunk, creak, thunk, creak, thunk.